Hello, welcome to a very short video on how to basically create the basis of the Spirograph program. We're also going to cover a little bit on some of these list tools. These are not all of them, these are just some of them. You'll find some useful and you'll find some less so, depending on how you decide to set up your script. But let's just get started. I have these two scripts already built. These are what I had shown in class earlier. They are pretty simple scripts. They consist of a set of parameters on the left, the actual creation of lines here in the middle, and then a creation of, or an assignment of color to the geometry here. The extra thing out here is a baking tool so that you can basically put it into Rhino as opposed to keeping it in Grasshopper. Really simply, this top one uses this circle. If I click on it, you can see it's turned green here. This one here will divide the curve. This just has a simple parameter. Right now it's set to 73, but we can always increase or decrease this based on what we want to put in here. There's a couple of things that I'm experimenting with here with partitioning. We'll get to that after the main one, but in class I covered shifting the list. What this does is it takes this number of 136 points right now and it moves it forward within the list, within the panel tool by, in this case, 25 places. So in this case, number 25 here will be shifted forward 25 more places. It will be number 50. Number 0 will now be number 25. If we go all the way to the bottom, 135 here, and then subtract by 25 to get to 110. 110 will now be item 0. Whenever you look at this just as an object, it looks basically the same. We haven't changed any of the data. We've just changed the order that it is displayed within this box. Easier to see in the panel. See negative 43 and then the negative 111 and the 0. Now there are different values. They're all the same ones. You can see just by clicking between the components, but they are different. Down here, I have just moved this circle up into by 146 units. That's what the unit Z is here. That's just to give some separation to make it a little bit easier to see. In perspective, it looks like it comes out, but it is essentially just a cylinder at this point. And then finally, I have connected the lines between them. If the shift is at 0, it will simply be a normal cylinder, that's reticulated. As we increase it, they start crossing the gap. As we get to about halfway, around 136, it's a little bit less than 70 here. You'll see it'll come to a point. That's because the ones directly across are connecting with the ones directly on the other side. But this is one way that we can use that parameter of shift list to kind of make a form and control a shape. The second portion of the script here, you'll notice that the data stream kind of pinches off. This is just a set of creation data, and then we are just manipulating this data further here. So it pinches and then expands again. I am getting this item. It is the list length. You'll notice that's 136. That's the same as the amount of items I was dividing by. So that'll change according with that same parameter. It's just easier for me to get that number straight out of here to make sure that whatever I'm getting out of this component matches to this component. From there, I'm creating a series. That is under sequence. It's actually right here. It creates a set of numbers. You get a starting number, and then you get the number it gets to have for each step. So in this case, it's 1, and then you get however many. I need as many as I have lengths of, or as I have for individual lines, hence why I'm taking list length. So it's going to go from 0 to 135, so 136 different values. From there, I have a gradient sampler. These are found in the parameters under input, gradient. There are other things here if you want to manually set one data or if you want to do 2 dimensions with an image sampler. But for what we're doing, the gradient is just fine. I've also changed the colors by going to presets and choosing a color. So yours may look like this red one at first. That's fine. whenever you are working with a gradient, you need to define what is the top number and the bottom, or the bottom number and the top number. Bottom number is going to be located all the way at the left, and the top number is going to be all the way at the right. If you change this, you will only use, if you change this and your data falls outside of what is essentially a domain, then it will assume it will either be, if it's lower, the lowest value, or if it's higher, will be the highest value. You will not get a gradation in between there. So make sure that you have these set. I know that my length list is going to be my highest number within this series, and that is just easy for me to say that's the top. The bottom is going to be 0 because the series starts at 0. Depending on how you are defining your overall bottom of the domain and top domain, things like sort list and list length can be really useful. If you need to sort a list by the distance, for instance, where it's just a value, if you sort it, the lowest value will be at the top and the highest value will be at the bottom. It's really easy to then take the sorted list and reverse it and just take the first thing out of each to change your bottom and your top. Being said, that leads us into the T here. So the T is the parameter. This is going to be where we want to sample this data at. In our case, it's going to sample it very evenly, very linearly across this set of data. We can manipulate that, but in our case, we're just applying these colors differently to each of the lines, and so we don't really need to mess with that too much right now. So finally, we go from our lines that we've got here. We've got our sampled colors, all 135 of them, and we can put them together in a custom preview. If we turn off that preview and we allow this to view, you can see that you get a full gradient from that red all the way to that blue. Now, if we bake this out into Grasshopper just from this tool, it will let us do it, but it will not retain those colors. That is not an inherent property of the object yet. That is just geometry. For us, it may be useful to just have it as an analysis in Grasshopper. But if we ever need to take that data out, we can use something called Object Bake. This is from Lunchbox. You can find this online in Food for Rhino or on Lunchbox's own website. They have a self-installing object for this entire range of plugins. Under Workflow, there's one called Object Bake. That's what you want. Same thing here. As everything else, you'll have inputs. You'll notice this ragged edge has no output. In order to get something out of this truly, we will need to use something called a button. So it's easy enough to just take the object color and drop it into object color here, and to take our original objects and drop it in here. It's almost exactly the same as custom preview, but we need to create a button that is located in parameters. This basically allows us to activate this component. It doesn't matter if it's labeled or anything. We just plug it in and then we plug it into the bake layer. If you have like specific layers or object names or layer colors, anything else that you want to like bake into your objects, you can do that here. They will likely have to be in the same size and list format in order to work correctly. But if you want to bake just as it is right now, you can just hit this button. So these objects are in Rhino, not in Grasshopper now. So that's pretty easy setup for putting this together. I am going to unbake that just to make it a little more visible. The other thing would be to look at doing between multiple curves. I have an internalized curve here and an internalized curve here. Similar type of setup. We're dividing a curve in order to get a certain amount. We're dividing the other curve again. We are using the same number, so it'll be the same amount of lines. We're using the shift list here just to change exactly where those start, but in the end we're going to get a set of numbers, or a set of lines in between all of those. This shift will move to and from this side, just because we're changing where that starting point of data is, and it will draw new lines according to how that's ordered. Same exact thing here, literally the same script. We can get our custom preview here. And you'll notice that that follows along with however we're shifting our list overall. Okay? The extra thing I wanted to show within this was this partition list. What this does as a list manager is it allows you to control the size of each list. It basically splits things up into smaller chunks. So if you need sets of 3 for something, say you're making triangles out of some random data, you can use this in order to create smaller lists. When I look at the lines that are created from here, you'll notice that I have one set of data here with multiple items, but then I have multiple lists here. That's the difference between these two line types. If I preview this, you'll notice that there are many lines now. As we zoom in, you can see an underlying structure, but that's because we're connecting all of these to these 4, or in this case 3 items of data in each of these lists. As we edit, increase, and decrease, and we will go ahead and make this a larger number for a second, we can start seeing some changes here. If we partition a list, let's say we partition this to 18, and we partition another list, let's say to 6. I just want them to have common numbers here. And then plug these all in together. We can start getting even stranger sets. Anyway, I hope that helps, and see you next time.